As Formula One drivers prepare for a new season with changed racing regulations, Max Verstappen and other drivers have warned that it would never be perfect, and that upcoming rule changes will only result in more trouble on the track. Last season, Lando Norris challenged Verstappen on the track and in the drivers' standings, calling Formula One's racing rules into question, which then resulted in harsher penalties and stricter rules. The two had 3 high-profile conflicts in Austria, Austin, and Mexico, which divided public opinion despite the fact that the stewards assigned fault and imposed penalties in all 3 occasions. Verstappen was punished 10 seconds at the Red Bull Ring for jinking left as Norris attempted to overtake him around the outside at turn 3, resulting in a collision, while Norris received a 5-second penalty at the Circuit of the Americas for overtaking Verstappen off the track. While that would normally result in a 10-second penalty, the stewards concluded that Car 4 had little alternative other than to leave the track because of the proximity of Car 1, which had also left the track, and thus lowered it to 5 seconds. Verstappen received a 10-second penalty for the same offence 1 race later, having already been punished for driving Norris off the track, with the stewards determining the Briton had the apex of the corner. Following Mexico, the FIA reached an agreement with the drivers to change their wheel-to-wheel combat rules, with George Russell saying that there is a line of regulation that says the inside driver needs to leave room to the guy on the outside from the apex to the exit. I think that's going to be getting binned off. I think the overtaking rules on the outside will not be changing much, and I don't think we've really seen much of a problem with that. Verstappen has stressed that the regulations would never be ideal because a driver's perspective varies according on the situation, and these new and changed ones may only result in less fighting on track, providing us all with less interesting races. I think it's not that straightforward, clearly even between how many seconds that you get, he said. I mean, sometimes they work for you, sometimes they work against you. I think it's never going to be perfect, because even if you remove rules, then you get into a battle. Then you want more rules because it's not clear what is allowed or not. Then, when you have too many rules, you want less rules. It just keeps on going left and right all the time. Do I think it's overregulated? Probably yes. I mean, in general, the rulebook is only getting bigger and bigger every single year. I don't think that's always the right way forward. Meanwhile, Oscar Piastri said he only wants consistency from the stewards. There probably are some tweaks that need to be made, said the McLaren driver. The FIA has acknowledged that and wants to work with us on that, which is very positive. But I think in general, we've got more consistency. Maybe some things can still be a bit more consistent. But I think at least for the stewards, they actually have a set of guidelines as to what kind of rules should be applied. I think we all agree that the rules may be not perfect and should be changed a bit, but at least we have something to look back to, which we didn't have before that. So I think things can always be improved. These guidelines haven't been around for that long, in the grand scheme of things. Again, you can't write rules, especially in racing, that are going to cover every single possibility and situation. So you always do need a kind of subjective steward to add their thoughts. But yes, I think we're in a much better place than we have been, and the FIA has been very, very supportive of trying to change that with us. He ended. Some drivers like it and some don't, but we'll have to wait and see a couple of races before we'll be able to really judge. But the on-track rules aren't the only ones changing, as off-track there are also a lot of changes. Especially now that Formula One teams have begun development of their 2026 car designs since the start of the month, with the restriction on next-generation rules officially removed. And now, teams will be faced with a choice over how many resources they want to devote to their 2026 cars, as they cannot completely neglect plans for the upcoming season. There will be a need for tactical management of where resources are best invested. Some may want to commit more to 2025 for short-term advantages, but others may be ready to write off next year in order to get an early start on 2026, while any team that starts next year behind schedule may be willing to commit to focusing on 2026. For the majority of squads, the key will be to stay flexible in how to approach things. In a perfect scenario, they nail their launch specification so that they can hit the ground running at the start of the season, giving them enough of an advantage to ease off 2025 development early and then go all out in 2026. Similarly, if a team struggles at the start of the year, it may believe that it is not worth investing more resources than necessary in the current car because it would be preferable to get a head start on its future competitor. This could result in teams quitting the fight at the front way earlier than they would if the regulations remained the same. However, because this is a very dynamic process, teams may be pulled into continuing with 2025 enhancements for much longer than they would like, either because they have a chance of finishing in the top 3 in the Constructors' Championship, or because they don't want to fall too far behind. Red Bull team leader Christian Horner stated that there is now no obvious answer as to what should be done. If you are in a tight battle, inevitably your development gets dragged into the season longer, which is particularly hard, he said. We saw that in 2021 into 2022, where you have a big conceptual change of regs. Obviously, the earlier start, the bigger advantage you have. But if there is a tight championship and it does go down to the wire, then that's going to be a tough balancing act for the different teams to choose how they apportion their resource. And with a rather bad 2024, they have some strides to make. Luckily, there has been one silver lining to the 2024 season. Not every part of the car was underperforming. As Christian Horner claims that the aerodynamic research boost for the new Red Bull RB21 car for F1 2025 is the only upside of the team's poor title defense last year. Red Bull driver Max Verstappen won his 4th consecutive World Championship in F1 2024, winning 9 races and defeating McLaren's Lando Norris by 63 points. However, Red Bull could only manage a distant 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, 63 points adrift of Ferrari and a further 14 behind McLaren, who secured their first team's title since 1998. However, there is one silver lining to it, as F1 has used a sliding scale for aerodynamic testing since 2021, with the order dependent on each team's position in the Constructors' standings. It means that the team in last position in the Constructors' standings receives significantly more aerodynamic research time than the title winners, with the goal of increasing competition among the sport's 10 teams. The sliding scale is adjusted twice a year, on January 1st to match the final order of the previous year's Constructors' standings, and again on July 1st to reflect the level of play halfway through each season, with the scale reset at the beginning of 2025. Red Bull's RB21 will have more wind tunnel and CFD time than the McLaren MCL39 or Ferrari's Project 677. And as said, the teams face an added difficulty when developing their F1 2025 cars, since this season marks the last year of the current rules before major technical regulation changes are enacted for F1 2026. Horner stated that the task of remaining competitive in F1 2025, while planning for F1 2026 will create a constant balancing act for the teams. And he sees Red Bull's aerodynamic research increase as the only edge in the team's chances of competing with McLaren and Ferrari this year. He stated, "It's a tough one, because we have the biggest regulation change in probably 50 or 60 years in the history of the sport, in F1 2026. So with that in mind, we hate finishing 3rd in the championship, but the additional wind tunnel time that comes with that is, if you like, the only upside in a year where there is such a dramatic regulatory change. It's a constant balancing act, and if you are in a tight battle, inevitably your development gets dragged into the season longer, which is particularly hard. It will be interesting to see if they'll be able to keep the balancing act together. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.